We are now 2 days removed from Texas beating Colorado State 52-0. Our updated reactions and takeaways from the Longhorns' first game of the season.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis and Lacey Butler, your host. Tony Monk, guest host today. He will be on the show every Monday for the remainder of the season from Spot on Sports. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast with zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Once again, continued takeaways and reactions from Texas 52-0 victory over Colorado State. In the second segment, our players of the game, our units of the game, who really stood out on the field at DKR on Saturday against Colorado State. And then in the last segment, the big SEC games. There were 4 of them: Florida, Miami, LSU, USC, Georgia, Clemson, and Texas A&M, Notre Dame. We react to all of those games in the last segment of today's show. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, Tony Monk joining me. My brother from college, he helped me get into broadcasting. You know, he's part of the reason you see me before you today, you know, and so he'll be on every Monday for the remainder of the season. So you'll get used to Tony Monk being on Locked On Longhorns as well. When we look at what Texas was able to do, you know, this past Saturday, beating up on Colorado State 52-0, it was obviously great to see the Longhorns back on the field. Great to see Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning do their things at quarterback, and there's all the skill talent, you know, the defense, the offensive line, just everybody, right? When you win a game 52-0, everybody has a hand in it. I mean, the coaching staff, it just was an amazing performance, right? And so, you know, we kind of had, you know, right after the game, the immediate reactions where you just turn the TV off, you just react to what you just saw, right? And then now we've had, almost 48 hours to kind of soak in the game, and, you know, some more stats have come out, some more things have come out, and, you know, really just kind of give our analysis on what we saw. So a couple takeaways from the game on Saturday. The first is, don't take what you saw for granted, right? You know, when you see Colorado State on the schedule, the first thing is, 1-0, right? Like, Texas is going to beat Colorado State. It's not going to be close. You just pencil in a victory, right? And obviously, if Colorado State would have lost to Texas, we'd be singing a completely different tone right now, right? Completely different tune, I guess I should say right now. But don't take what you saw for granted, because you still have to go out there and play the games, right? You still have to go out there and score those 52 points. You still have to go out there for 60 minutes and not allow any, right? And so that's what we saw. And, you know, you can kind of get bored with greatness at times, especially when it's against a team like Colorado State, right? You're like, oh, we're supposed to be doing this, right? Like, you're supposed to be beating Colorado State like this. But when we saw over the weekend, that's not always guaranteed, right? Here's just a few examples, not exact parallels, but here's just a few examples of why you can't take what you saw from the Texas Longhorns for granted on Saturday. Virginia Tech was favored by 2 touchdowns on the road over Vanderbilt, right? Vanderbilt, the laughingstock of the SEC. Virginia Tech lost by 7, right? Iowa State was a 31-point favorite and only beat North Dakota 21-3. That game was a little closer than comfort, right? South Carolina only beat Old Dominion at home by 4 points. I don't even know where Old Dominion is, right? So, you know what I mean? Like I said, you cannot take greatness for granted. You cannot take what the Longhorns did on the field for granted. And then a couple closer examples to the Longhorns and the teams they played. Oregon, the number 3 team in the country, currently ranked above Texas. I hope that changes after what we saw this weekend. They were close to a 40-point favorite against Idaho and only won by 10. That was a 7-point game at halftime. Michigan, the defending national champions, who Texas will play next Saturday, only beat Fresno State 30-10. Only beat them by 20 points. That was a 7-point game at halftime. So like I said, you pencil in the victory. You expect Texas to beat up on Colorado State the way they did. Just don't take it for granted, right? Because you still got to go out there and do it. They still scored the 52 points. They still allowed 0. My second takeaway, Steve Sarkisian's scheme is really running back friendly. We know he's had a 1,000-yard rusher every year since he's been at Washington. And, you know, I think with him being at Texas and Alabama, I just thought, you know, he had really good players, right? Obviously, he knows how to run the ball, and, you know, his run games have always been great. But I always thought, you know, he's always had really good players. At Alabama, it was Najee Harris, right? And then you come to Texas, he's had Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Brooks, Roshan Johnson, Keelan Robinson, who are all in the National Football League at this point. Then you have a 5-star in Cedric Baxter, a high 4-star in Jaden Blue, right? So when they perform, it's like, okay, you expect them to do that because they were, high stars coming out of high school. But then we saw in this game with the injuries to Cedric Baxter and Christian Clark, like certain players have to step up, right? In this game, Jaden Blue, 14 touches for 94 yards. Trey Wisner, who only had 12 carries coming out of DeSoto his true freshman season last year, 6 touches for 40 yards. And then the true freshman, Jared Gibson out of Florida, in with the second unit, 10 carries for 67 yards. I've always given the running game credit because we've had really good players. But now, just regardless of the offensive line, his running backs always produce. This scheme is really running back friendly. And it gives me, hope that even with the injuries we've had, you really can plug anybody in there, right? You probably could plug me and Tony in there, and that running game would still be really good at the University of Texas. And then the last thing, the development on the back end has been special. I know ending the season last year, we weren't the best in the secondary. But when you look at some of the guys that have been here 3-4 years and how they've developed over the years, you have to give all the credit in the world to Pete Kukowski, Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon. Michael Taft, a walk-on from Westlake, who's now one of the most consistent and best safeties in the country. Jade Barron, who had a great performance, showing he can play on the outside in this game against Colorado State. A little bit more about him in the next segment. Gavin Holmes, right, who didn't have the best season last year. We heard about him having a really good offseason. That showed up in the game against Colorado State with a couple of pass deflections. And then Malik Muhammad, right, from like the 4th or 5th game of his true freshman season, he's been a lockdown corner out of South Oak Cliff, and that continued in this game on Saturday against Colorado State. So those are my takeaways. Tony, I'm going to pass it to you. What were the biggest things you noticed from Texas 52-0 victory over Colorado State this weekend?
Well, John, thanks for having me, man. And to go back to the beginning, you belong here, dude. Don't ever forget that. One of the things that I took away from this was any time that you shut a team out 52-0, let's be honest now, it is college football and there is a difference between the level of play and the level of competition, the level of talent. But from start to finish, I watched Steve Sarkisian have this team ready. They were on fire. And it's easy to let up on a team like Colorado State once it's the third quarter and you're beating them by 30 or 40 points. And you're like, oh, okay. And the backups come in and the stadium is set on fire when Arch Manning walked into the game, and these guys are still rolling and they're going. But first, I'm going to start out with Quinn Ewers, obviously, just because one of the questions I had about him last year was the confidence level. Obviously, he dealt with a little bit of the injuries, and I wanted to come in and see, even if it is just Colorado State, can you show that you're more of the leader as opposed to the cog that makes the machine run? Like the guys from last year are Worthy and all of those cats, they're all gone. And now it's you with the new receiving core. It's you with the retooled offensive line. It's you with this whole new group of guys. And I wanted to see, could Quinn step up now? Albeit, yes, it is just Colorado State. Is it going to be Michigan next week? No. Is it going to be Bama and Georgia and all these teams on later on down the road? No. But anytime that you dust a team 52-0, there's still things in that I want to see. Yes, can you fully stomp a mud hole in a team like Colorado State? And I think they really did that. I think Quinn Ewers, for the time that he was on the field, he looked very good. My next thing is takeaways with the defense, man. The defense, T'Vondre Sweat and those guys are gone now, and they held this Colorado State team to about 40 carries, 100 yards. And no, they're not going to be the best running team they're going to see all season. But to still hold a team to those type of numbers with this new retooled interior defensive line, that was one of the things I wanted to see. You gave a couple of those marks to those standout guys. I thought Jade Barron being able to move around yesterday, being in the nickel, being on the outside, it kind of moved around. The great interception that he had yesterday, I think that was one of the key marks. The running back room, you spoke on that and how running back friendly that this offense was going to be. Those are one of the things that I wanted to see, even though, and I'm brain farting here, John. He just got drafted to the Carolina Panthers last year.
Jonathan Brooks,
with him being gone and what Blue and the rest of those cats were going to do, and whether they was going to kind of take this committee-ish approach. But I kind of think some of that is going to be needed, just kind of with the schedule that they have, and they're going to be going up a lot of guys, especially they're going to be really good in the trenches, teams like Georgia, that you're going to need a host of running backs to kind of be able to carry the load for this team. But I thought this team looked fast. I thought this team, they still left me wanting more, especially from the receiver position. Isaiah Bond, how exciting is he going to be this year? Golden, Jonte Cook, Ryan Wingo. I think we didn't get to see yesterday, John, an opportunity for one guy to really just stand out yet. And I think that's good. I think that's a good thing because obviously Colorado State, and I keep saying this, they're not going to be a team that pushes Texas to the limit. But for what Texas were able to do, they spread the ball. They gave the ball to a lot of guys. A lot of guys you kind of saw what they were able to do in open space. I think this team definitely leads me to wanting more. They have a lot of excitement to them. I kind of want to see a little bit more involvement with Bond going forward. But I think for just being able to spread the ball out against a team that wasn't really going to challenge you, I think you really did a whole lot of goodness than you did bad yesterday. And obviously it wasn't bad when you shut out a team 52-0.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I think when you talk about like, Bond and, just the receivers being more involved, I think that just comes with the rotations and, Bond didn't play, half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter and things like that. So, going forward, when you're playing against tougher opponents and, the games are tougher, I think you'll see, bigger performances from him. And then you talk about the defense and what they allowed to the running game. This football team allowed 24 passing attempts for 74 yards, right? So just a dominant performance on all ends on the defensive side. Quick word from our sponsors. We're going to get to the money real quick and then talk about some of our players of the game, specifically what players stood out against Colorado State. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Just give me a second. Let me get this pulled up. After lunch, are you tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, bringing Tony back in, and now we're going to talk about some of our players of the game, right? Some of the individual standouts that we saw this past Saturday, and for me, it starts with Ryan Wingo, right? I think everybody in the receiver room was great. Isaiah Bond had 61 yards, needed him to get to 70 for my parlay, but I understood get him out of there healthy, right? Before Michigan in some of the bigger games of the season. So I was cool with losing my parlay on that day. Matthew Golden with 50 yards and 2 touchdowns. But when you look at who was the receiving leader on that day, true freshman Ryan Wingo. And just shout out to this true freshman class of receivers, period. We saw at Alabama and some other schools, right? There was just some true freshmen that came in their first game and, let it be known that they're going to be really good players in college football. When you look at Ryan Wingo, did 4 catches for 70 yards, 43 yards after the catch, right? So showing that ability to get the ball in his hands quick, make plays, getting that yak, right? Breaking tackles and things of that nature. 3 first downs on 4 catches, right? So that's a 75% first down rate. That's elite, even though it's against Colorado State. And he was the highest graded player on offense, according to Pro Football Focus, 90.8 Pro Football Focus grade. That's elite, ladies and gentlemen, for the people that don't follow Pro Football Focus. So, I thought that we heard all offseason about Ryan Wingo being ready to step on the field from the moment he got on campus. Just the maturity in terms of how he approached his business, the maturity in terms of his body, right? Being 6'2", 210, and really having that really good frame as a wide receiver from the moment he came from St. Louis to Austin, Texas. But then you see it on the field, right? We saw it in the spring game. But that's a spring game, right? And then you see it, in the first game against Colorado State, and it's like, yeah, Ryan Wingo is a baller, and he's ready to contribute to a national championship contending football team, hopefully, right now. Like I said, the highest graded player on offense, led the team in receiving in just his first game at the 40 acres. Ryan Wingo, 4 catches for 70 yards, 91 PFF grade on offense. Then you look at it, Jahdae Barron, right? He came back. A lot of people thought that he would enter the draft. If he entered the draft, Texas would have had 12 players drafted. Certainly he was good enough. But I think like Quinn Ewers, he felt like, he could do more, right? He felt like there was still some meat on the bone and he could come and, add to his legacy at the University of Texas. Also, I think when you look at it last year, Quinn Ewers was one of the leaders on the offense. Jahdae Barron certainly was one of the leaders on the defense. And, you take that Sugar Bowl loss, pretty bad, the way they lost to Washington, and you say we can come back and, we can, go further as a team. at the University of Texas. And so the biggest question for Jade, because we know that Jalen Gilbo was going to take over, the majority of the snaps in that star kind of nickel position, is could Jade Barron play outside, right? Could he consistently play outside and still be a great playmaker for this defense? And I think we saw that on Saturday, albeit against Colorado State. I know they only passed for 74 yards, right? But like I said, we cannot take for granted what we saw on the field. On the field for 27 snaps, he was targeted just once in coverage, right? And don't get that mistaken. Don't get that mistaken that he just had a good day because he was only targeted once. There's a reason he was only targeted once.
John, let me say, because now I feel like I got to have that conversation with you. Like, let me say, when a team is passing for less than 100 yards in an actual college football game where the game is more pass happy than any other profession in the league or in the world, that says a lot. And that's why literally I have in my notes, Jade Barron can be that guy for Texas secondary, being able to move around. So look, sorry to cut you off on that.
Yeah, no, you good for sure. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, like they only passed for 74 yards, right? But there's a reason out of 27 snaps, he was only targeted once, right? Of course, some of those are run plays, but his dude wasn't open, right? Like whoever he was guarding wasn't open. That's the reason that he was only targeted once. Had that elite interception. When you look at it, just going back and looking at the play, he was in zone coverage, right? But he read the quarterback's eyes, went downfield to make that play. He actually left his receiver open, right? But that's just, knowing, quarterback tendencies, knowing your responsibility, and then being able to help out and going and getting that ball. He had an 89.6 Pro Football Focus coverage grade, which is elite. So Jade Barron, at least in game one, answered those questions of could he be a legitimate outside corner for the Texas Longhorns. And then Bert Auburn, right? We can't get bored with the special teams. And I know we don't mention the kickers and the punters a lot on this show, but you need consistency at the kicking position, right? And so Bert Auburn made 8 total kicks on the day out of 8 attempts. He had 1 field goal in the first quarter for 45 yards and then 7 extra points. So when we're talking about Texas beating Colorado State 52-0, just remember your kicker with the best hair in the business, he scored 10 of those points, right? 1 field goal and 7 extra points. So he was asked to kick 8 times and he made all 8 of those kicks. So I got to give some love to Bert Auburn. Tony, who were your players or units of the game? Who stood out to you against Colorado State?
Well, I'm going to go back to the defense, with those guys, Alfred Collins, and Bill Norton. And again, the question was, can those guys do the things that Byron and T'Vondre Sweat were able to accomplish last year? And yes, it is just Colorado State, everybody. We're going to keep on mentioning that just so we can acknowledge the level of play and the level of competition. But again, anytime you shut a team out like that and they do not score, Colorado State didn't make it past the 44-yard line for what was, if not the majority, if not the whole point of the game. And so that speaks a lot to this defensive unit for those guys to really be able to limit. Another guy that I do have on offense, I really like Jared Gibson. Again, I think for a person to be able to complement Blue, to be able to really take a lot of that load off of him in what is going to be a very long season, especially dealing with a lot of these SEC teams, you're going to need another guy that can really come in and take that load off. The receiver core, you love Ryan Wingo, so do I. Being able to see that kid just kind of come in and work, and then the type of compliment he's going to add to what Golden can do, what Isaiah Bond can do. Again, I'm really throwing a lot of love to Quinn Ewers right now. I just really love that he came in and showed that confidence. John, are we avoiding the big elephant in the room right now that we don't want to say because it's so obvious?
No, it's not even that. Obviously, I think I know who you're talking about. I think Arch Manning played well. For sure. He completed his first 5 passes for 95 yards for sure. He was good.
I'll just bring it in because that's the exciting point. That Texas does host one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league, and I don't say this to pull out the easy guy and say, oh, it's super easy to talk about Arch, but I think Texas fans should be very joyful right now, knowing that they are in the best hands at the quarterback position for what could be one of the better quarterback rooms in the nation. And I think for your backup to be able to come in, and I couldn't tell what seemed like a drop-off yesterday for this Texas team between the time that Quinn Ewers was in to the time that Arch Manning was in. And I think it speaks a lot for this offense. I think it speaks a lot for Sark, who I'm also going to throw and give roses to for this game, that he was able to call and just having his team where they needed to be. But across the board, even with the DBs, Jade Barron, you spoke with him. Spoke about him, and being able to move around. Could he play on the outside and still kind of have that elite level of play? I saw this guy all over the place on defense. And before John, before I actually had to just see who this guy was. I'm like, well, who's this cat that keep moving all over the ball? Okay, I said he's able to play multiple spots. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's the Jahdae Barron guy. And one of the questions for Texas has always kind of been the secondary. You can kind of go back to how the playoffs kind of ended last year with Washington and they're being able to throw all over the field on this Texas secondary. I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of that this time, John. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of that with cats like Wardell Mack, who's able to kind of step in some roles. Obviously, what Jahdae Barron and the other guys are going to be able to do. Again, the team leaves me wanting more, and I'm not trying to deviate too far with which unit stood out and stuff, but I just have more questions. And we're going to get a lot of that answer next week when we make their lineup against Michigan. But I just think overall this was one of those team things where the whole entire unit step up. Special teams was able to make plays. Again, I just see a team that was able to play fast from start to finish, and they didn't let up on this Colorado team.
Yeah, for sure. Just great performances all over the board. And I think that, this is the sign of a healthy program. When you look at the Georgias and the Alabamas, you're like, damn, they're replacing, these 5 stars with 5 stars, right? These elite running backs and quarterbacks or wide receivers are leaving, and then they're just stepping up, right? And I think you saw a glimpse of that with Texas. Same thing with Georgia, right? Like when you took the starters out, you see players like Ryan Wingo, right? Jonte Cook, Arch Manning, Jared Gibson, a true freshman, Wardell Mack, a true freshman, at corner, who probably won't play like a ton of playing time this year, right? So it's like that's the future, right? You know what I mean? Like those are going to be the future starters at the University of Texas, and they're already making plays right now. So this is just a sign of a healthy program. Steve Sarkisian has recruited the way that Nick Saban did at Alabama, and the way that Kirby Smart is currently recruiting at Georgia. And I think you're seeing the fruit of that, that labor, or the benefit of that labor on the field, especially this past Saturday. Another word from our sponsors, and then we get into some of the big 4 games from the SEC over the weekend, some of the biggest matchups, some of the best games college football had to offer this past weekend. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Hey, Locked On Longhorn fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being Steve Sarkisian of the Texas Longhorns and leading them to a national championship, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships? You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Longhorns fans. Use the promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so just talking about some of the biggest games in college football over the weekend. Of course, we had the big 4 matchups. Georgia, #1 team in the country, going against Clemson. You had Florida going against Miami, a big in-state rivalry. Texas A&M going against Notre Dame. And then Sunday night, we saw LSU versus USC. So just talking about those games. I'm trying to find. There we go. We're 9 subscribers away from 4,000, right? If you're still listening at this point in the show, 9 subscribers away from 4,000. So tell a friend to tell a friend, tell your cousin, auntie, granny, whoever watches Locked On Longhorns, whoever be on YouTube, tell them to get on here and subscribe to Locked On Longhorns. Get us to 4,000 by the Michigan game. But my takeaways from the 4 big SEC games that we saw: Georgia's still Georgia. When the AP poll comes out this week, Georgia will still be the #1 team in the country. Clemson was just outmatched, right? I know they were one of 4 FBS teams to not take a single player out of the portal. And get this, the other 3 teams were the service academies, right? Air Force, Navy, and Army, right? And then you got Clemson, who's won 2 national championships over the last decade, which is just insane, right? But, Dabo Swinney has decided he doesn't want to use the transfer portal. And I think, we're seeing, that decision, kind of resonate on the field. Cade Klubnik out of Westlake, we thought that, he might take a step and improve this season. And, of course, he was going against Georgia, so maybe that's the way he looked, maybe that's why he looked the way he did on Saturday. But Cade Klubnik still isn't ready. And this Clemson offense just doesn't look that good. And, I don't see them being a contender, especially after what we saw, in the Miami game, really in the ACC or in the college football playoffs. Clemson might just be on the way out of being relevant right now. And Dabo Swinney has a lot to do with that. But, when you look at it, their defense was really good. Eventually they broke with no help. And, Carson Beck and that offense turned it up in the second half. They scored 34 points on a really good Clemson defense. And they did it without one of the most explosive playmakers in the country in Trevor Etienne, who was suspended for the game. So when you look at it, Georgia's still the number one team in the country. You're still going to have to go through them to win a national championship, especially in this expanded playoff with 12 teams. Georgia's not missing the playoffs this year, right? Regardless of the schedule. You look at Texas A&M and Notre Dame. I'm mad that I picked Texas A&M to win in this game. And then Locked On, of course, they put me on a Summer Jam screen. They blasted it everywhere, right? The Texas host is picking Texas A&M to win. So I'm like, damn, at least, If I got to root for the Aggies, at least they win so I can be right? And then, of course, they lost to Notre Dame. So I was just wrong on all parts, right? I picked Texas A&M to win. I had to root for them to win so I could be right because they put me on the Summer Jam screen. And then, of course, in typical Aggie fashion, they go out there and lose. But, I thought it was two really good defenses, right? That's what I took. It was just really two defenses. You could say Notre Dame is elite. You could say Texas A&M is borderline elite. I just thought Notre Dame just had a little bit more juice on offense, right? And they had, LSU's old offensive coordinator. I think you saw that in the play calling, especially in the second half. I thought Connor Weigman was going to come in and have a strong performance. I was a lot higher on Connor Weigman, of course, than more Texas fans, but I thought he was really strong in the beginning of the season last year, and it just did not show up on Saturday against Notre Dame, right? He had 2 interceptions, was just missing throws, and, I think had 30 attempts for like only 100 yards. He just was not good against Notre Dame, and they also don't have a single offensive player that strikes fear in anybody, right? They lost so much to the portal and, just players going down. So I think that A&M defense is going to be really good, but that offense doesn't scare anybody. It's going to be a tough first season for Mike Elko down there at A&M. Florida and Miami. Miami outclassed Florida in every single way. That was just bad, right? I thought, coming into this game, Florida having their backs against the wall, Billy Napier being on the hot seat, them returning so many starters on offense. I thought that they would look really good on that side of the ball at home where they have won 33 straight games in the Swamp. I thought they would give Miami a game, right? And Cam Ward, stamped his flag in terms of the Heisman conversation, and they just blitzed Florida. Really, the only offense they had was that 72-yard touchdown run by Montrell Johnson. Outside of that, 41-17. Miami just went in there and beat up on Florida in the Swamp. And it begs the question, by the time Texas plays Florida, will Billy Napier still be the head coach? Will Graham Mertz still be the starting quarterback? We don't know. That schedule is only going to get tougher. And Florida right now is looking like a 4 or 5 win football team, maybe 6 on the high end. And then USC, LSU, I thought that was the best game of the weekend, right? Sunday night, I really thought that was the best game of the weekend. Amazing game. When you look at it, it was like we saw elite offensive performances, right? Both quarterbacks went over 300 yards. We saw Kyron Lacey, a wide receiver for LSU, going crazy. We saw the wide receivers for USC going crazy. But it wasn't a 49-42 game, right? They still kept the scoring low, even though there were some elite offensive performances. We saw great defensive plays, right, on both sides, right? We really saw the benefit of Lincoln Riley having a defensive coordinator that's worth a damn now. You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't a 10-3 football game, right? So there were still some points scored, still some yards put up. But I thought it was great, plays by the defense and great plays by the offense all over the field. It felt like LSU was in total control of that game, right? Going into the fourth quarter, it was 17-13. They were running the ball really well. It really felt like LSU was going to put that stamp, put their stamp on the game, show them what SEC football is like, you know what I mean? And then, the Trojans just got hot in the last 5-6 minutes of the game. And even though LSU was up 17-13 in the fourth quarter, running the ball really well, from that point on, USC was able to outscore them 14-3 and get a huge victory over LSU, a huge program boost and a huge playoff resume builder, while LSU gets shot in the heart again in the first week of the season. They have now not won their season opener since either 2019 or 2020, I believe, which is crazy for a program as storied as LSU. So some great games over the weekend involving SEC play. And, of course, the biggest SEC game this weekend, Texas, Michigan. We'll be talking about that game all week leading up to Saturday. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked on Longhorns. Thank you for my brother Tony Monk coming on Locked on Longhorns. Like I said, he will be here every Monday recapping the previous game of the season. Hook 'em. Peace.